Because of the work I was doing, I got banned from about 10 universities.
All right. So, Suffiyan, thank you for joining us for Lumos House Talks. Basically, we do this kind of open discussions at every house. We have a huge audience for founders, early stage founders, people that have a lot of questions on how to actually make it, because it's one of the craziest parts of your life when you start a company and you have so many unknowns, and we try to provide them with a lot of information that we can from folks like you that are experienced in this. I'm Bogdan. I'm co-founder of Blindspot and Lumos House, together with Matei and Andrew. Matei?
Yep. Yeah, so like Bogdan said, we love doing this type of stuff to get actual insights. We want honest answers as much as possible without jeopardizing your livelihood or your life, you know. But yeah, I think it would be great if you can tell us a bit about your background, how you got into this space, what you love about this space, what you don't love as much about this space, maybe, and go from there.
Well, Thank you both for having me. I love doing spontaneous stuff, and this is pretty spontaneous. So how much time do we have? My background? And
a few days.
Yeah, we can talk about this forever.
Yeah.
So
okay, so I went to college in Pakistan for electrical engineering. That was not my thing. I originally wanted to do mechatronics engineering, but so what brown parents do is they do a all family meeting, and they try to get the elders to convey a message to you if they want to convince you of something. And they convinced me at the time that robotics does not have a future in Pakistan. So like that's a wrong career path. They were right. In Pakistan, robotics had no future. I ended up in electrical. In protest, I never showed up in classes the first year. So my GPA first semester was 1.69. It's a funny number. I almost, 2 years in, I almost was kicked out because I was doing so poorly. But that's when I realized that I needed another career path, and that like engineering might not be it. So I love doing the labs and I love doing the workshops. I just wasn't into the theoretical part. Also probably had bad teachers. Oh shit, this was going online.
yeah, I mean, we're doing this with jets flying above our heads, Harleys passing on the streets and stuff.
It's great. My dad was in the military, so I grew up with this stuff. It feels like home. But that's how it started, and like that the need for an alternative career pushed me into looking outside my university. So I found this nonprofit foundation out of Boston. It's called the Hult Prize Foundation. They award $1 million in grant to a team of student entrepreneurs from anywhere in the world. They were associated with Bill Clinton. They still are. They used to do their global finals at the UN headquarters. So that was like my first exposure to the world of entrepreneurship. I got hired by them full time. I took a 2-year break from college. That led me to running residential programs in the UK for 200 entrepreneurs. It really got me into the thick of everything. I started coming to New York very early on. And before I knew anything else, I started building communities. So I expanded and grew our campus program to 60 campuses, and then 40 of them dropped out. That's when I learned what churn meant. And I realized a one-man army can't do everything. Because of the work I was doing, I got banned from about 10 universities. You were probably expecting a different answer. So, including my own university, I was banned from doing an event on my own campus. And I'll tell you why. It's because entrepreneurship was a very nascent concept in Pakistan in 2015-16. And parents, usually in Asia, pay for their kids, college fees. So you don't have a lot of free will. And they're doing that to secure your future or their kids' future. Whereas I'm doing the complete opposite. I'm like, hey, build risk appetite, go follow your dreams, go build something, right? So that was risky. That meant like these parents are risking their life savings, right? So there was a lot of backlash, and there was not just backlash within like the parents, there was backlash within the school administration at the time, because they're there to become job creators, right? So there was a lot of backlash there, and but that was good, because when you do something contrarian in a society, well, it's funny to think mid 2010s that's contrarian in a society, but when you do something contrarian in a society, the handful of people who are doing the same thing, they find you. You become discoverable. So the founders of the first or the largest telecom company in Pakistan reached out inbound. And building $1 billion business anywhere is the same. They were extremely well connected within the government. They were extremely well connected within the corporate sector, and that's how I got like really deep in the Pakistani startup ecosystem as well, and went on to work with them 4 years later, which is how I started the Draper job, by the way, through them. That's like the short version of it.
That's a crazy path and life story. That's amazing.
Along the way, like I ended up meeting the prime minister of the country, bunch of stuff happened. And
what do your parents think about this now?
I come from a very middle class family. My dad retired as colonel in the army, and he was the first person out of his village. And so he really went out to build a life for himself. The parade looks great.
We have a parade in the background.
So he was the first person to move out of the village within his family, and within like our family, I'm only my mom and dad's family combined, I'm only the third person to move out of the country.
That's amazing. How long have you been in the US for?
3.5 years now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, congrats. I mean, the pathway is like, you're like a unicorn startup going like that.
It's interesting what you said about the risk appetite and everything, because so Bogdan and I are Romanian, our background, we were born and raised in Romania, and I think former communist countries have the same issue with risk appetite. And I was reading somewhere, I forget where, but I was reading that the difference between a US founder and a European founder is, and it's probably similar to Pakistan, we only have one shot to make it. It's not like we can try it once and then if it fails, oh, no problem, I'll just start again, right? Whereas in the US, you can fail 100 times and it's fine, you start over and you only need to make it once. So I think do you think that's one of the things that we need to kind of change in terms of mindset?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
It's a cultural thing. I don't have a lot of exposure to most of Europe, except from the founders we meet here. But I've spent a lot of time in the UK and some time in Germany. It's a cultural thing. I relate a lot with them, right? But that's a bad thing, right?
And how do you think you can go about changing that type of stuff, right? So teaching people that it's okay to mess up and you're supposed to mess up. It's a miracle if you get it right on the first time, right? So that shouldn't be your expectation. So especially because, I mean, you're heavily invested now on the education side, I would call it, right? So what do you think is the process to teach someone to truly understand that it's okay if you don't make it the first 5 times, not the first time? You know, how do you start doing that?
How does the army train people?
Repetition.
That's right.
Right? Repetition.
Yeah, that's right. Repetition. So we're naturally, not, well, some of us are, we don't like to obey rules, right? When young officers or soldiers are signing up for the army, they're used to not obeying rules. And, there's this cult mentality created that obeying is the norm, right? And that's through repetition and punishment and like incentives that are set up, right, in that particular way. So you were spot on. Learning that failure is okay is the number one thing. But how do you engineer that for someone? So that's a journey I went through as well. It's something that has been lost to, I think, modern society. It's what universities or colleges were supposed to be. But true education is learning a skill, at the frontiers from an apprenticeship model, where you're learning it from someone who's the most skilled at it, right? Who has like sort of achieved some level of greatness at it or consistency at it. You learn from them and you just go and repeat. So I think like being completely okay with embarrassment and failure is something that can be drilled down.
So we were talking off podcast about something that I found really, you said that I found really insightful, unlearning, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, learning through repetition, that makes sense. I think the military example is brilliant. But in order to get there, you must first unlearn everything you've learned so far, right? Because people start this journey, usually best case scenario in their 20s, maybe even later, maybe even later. So they already know a lot of stuff. So how do you go about unlearning what you already know?
So this is something, I mean, just outside of Draper, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. How do you, because currently what happens is, allow me to explain what happens, right? We take in entrepreneurs between ages, the average age has gone up as our business model has changed, but now it's around 28, 29. And the youngest could be 18, the oldest could be like 40, right, in the cohort. As like we bring in this cohort, what we're realizing is that it's hard not to get distracted. But hopefully we're going to edit that out, right? So, okay. It's hard to miss that, though.
Really, yeah. We have a huge parade.
I mean, we can leave some of this stuff in for the cuts.
Yeah, we'll do some of it in.
Look at that.
Oh yeah, super impressive though. You should get one if you can. Can you get one? Like,
I've been trying to take pictures of jets living behind what they fly.
Pretty fun stuff.
where is it now? Yeah, there it is. The background.
My dad wanted me to go check out the fleet show, so here I am. He was like, you don't do anything besides work.
Directly from the rooftop, right?
Yeah, that was fun. I think there are more coming. Look at that
Oh yeah,
one.
there'll be, there's two. You can't see them with the camera, but there's two in the back over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are not the angels. The angels are flying right above us. So
But SpaceX landed its booster, Starship booster this morning. Oh my
that
God.
was insane. I actually woke up for some reason at 5, and
Yeah.
all my alerts were going on.
It was landing somewhere in the universe.
I just tuned in, and then 5 minutes later, the booster comes down. And I was like, "Holy, they fucking did it! It's insane."
On their 4th test flight, which is I don't think a lot of us realize what that means.
Plus, it's one of the
Yeah.
most impressive and spectacular things you can see, like
Yeah.
that bloody building
Oh, yeah.
coming on the Mechazilla stuff. They did screw up with the ship. Actually, it burned up. I mean, it landed on the water, but it was on fire.
It's only the 4th test flight. Oh, cool.
You're right. I mean, I have never. First of all, I never believed they can do it this fast, and for some reason, FAA keeps blocking them to do the tests because I think they should get a pass and try this just to accelerate humanity and space and space tech. which is-
100%.
But being able on this flight to land I mean, listen, it's a crane catching a rocket coming from space in mid-air. That
Yeah.
by itself sounds insane. When Elon said it first, everybody
Right.
was like, get the fuck out of here. That's
Yeah.
never gonna happen.
Yeah.
To see it actually land, and it's as tall as that bloody famous San Francisco building.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Like the engineering going, those guys are heroes.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Again, we can get more into like space stuff if you want.
100%. I'm a space nerd. I watch every space podcast, every rocket launch, every
Yeah.
mini satellite, whatever.
So here's my thesis around space. I think, again, as humans, we underestimate what we can accomplish in decades and overestimate what can be done in like 5 years, right? All of technology as a sector that we know today is only 50 years old. All of Silicon Valley is like 50 years old, right?
And like, a flight is
Yeah.
120 years old, right? Just
Flight
that-
is
yeah,
120
yeah.
years old, exactly. So I think within our lifetimes, we might be 80, 90, or 100. I don't know. Hopefully we live that long. our generation is going to see humans land on another planet, right? So we're like going to see life get multiplanetary within the next 50 to 70 years. And the current generation is not prepared for the new economy, right? There has been an overflow of computer science graduates, and not just that, of people learning software, because talent usually flows to the highest paying jobs or highest paying professions. So how do we like tilt that towards more advanced technologies? Because for space colonization, you don't just need rockets. You need to figure out robotics, you need to figure out energy, you need to figure out advanced materials. You know this. You're into space, so you know this.
So I want to add on top of what you were saying. I think we're not ready not only for what we can do, but once space becomes democratized and it becomes easier to go to the moon, to mine Mars, to mine asteroids, to produce stuff in space.
The heart in the sky over there. I don't know if you can see it.
And the arrow in the middle.
I do.
Arrow and a heart.
It's pretty funny.
Sorry, go ahead.
But like, look at Varda. They're testing space manufacturing, and apparently
I was at Warda actually this Thursday.
You were there?
Yeah. I was at their annual
That's
party.
insane what they're doing. And imagine all the other stuff that we can do, and all the other materials and products that even grow stuff in space that we can actually benefit from. And this needs, from my point of view, less regulation.
More planes?
I'm pretty sure the pilot agrees with me on this. It needs less regulation from, or let's say less ancient regulation, more modern regulation, because I'm pretty sure the guys at SpaceX don't want anything bad to happen with anybody.
Oh yeah,
on Earth.
100%.
But let's accelerate it, because the potential for human development is insane. Like you were saying, space technology is 50 years old, but at the rate that we evolve in microchips, in computing, in quantum computing, these leaps are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. And there's a huge horizon for us as humans to what we can achieve if we open it up.
Yeah, 100%.
That was one
This
way
is
to
going
make
to
a
be-
point, Bogdan.
One hell of an episode, huh? Okay.
I wanted to add to this because I find it fascinating. I got into reading the Free Body Problem, if you know the books, right? That talk about exactly what you said. Like the humanity doesn't have the mindset to think 200 years into the future or 400 years in the future.
Yeah.
At every type of podcast like this, people ask, where do you see the future in 5 years? The future isn't 5 years. 5 years is in 2 minutes, you know what I mean? Compared to the grand scheme of things. And apart from the tech side, which is obviously the most important part because you need to have that, I think that there needs to be a way for which we teach society to think in that type of timeline, you know, like don't just think about how the world will look like in 10 years and try to evolve humanity towards thinking more for the long term and for future generations. I think Asia does that really well from a cultural standpoint. I think they think more, you know, for future generations rather than Europeans. Europeans kind of think next generation tops. I think America is also very what happens next in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure how we do that, but I think we need to do both at the same time. Tech first, of course, but then also kind of this this research into how do you get people to think that way about the future.
And now you've entered the conversation I was meaning to have, right? So it brings us back to the question you asked earlier, which is like, can you train them, or how do you train them, and what's the unlearning process, right? So currently the unlearning period is 2 to 5 years. 2 years for like probably a top percentile, like it's longer for, you know, the rest, from whatever thought processes you have, whatever like frameworks you have about life, right? Whatever markets you want to build in, whatever like technologies, whatever problems you want to solve, whatever technologies you want to work with, right? You're that's like in most people who are in their late 20s, mid 20s, early 30s, they've thought through that. They have to go through an unlearning journey to go work on something else, or make money to go work on something else.
Do you think one of the things that folks need to unlearn is fear, or transition fear to another sort of fear?
I don't think it's fear that keeps us. I think we have to unlearn populism. We have to like stop. We have to stop focusing on what's trendy and stop getting distracted by what's trendy, and like, as you said, like think in 20-year, 30-year, 40-year terms.
So how do we shut down social networks then?
So you don't have to shut down social networks, but I think they're important distribution mechanisms. So they also do a lot of good. But you can train people very early on in their journeys. And what I mean by early on is not when they're like kids. I'm saying 18 to 28-year-olds who have this raw ambition, raw talent. So I believe you're both immigrants, I'm an immigrant. I believe talent is abundant and access to opportunity is limited, right? On the coasts, where you have universities like Stanford, UC Berkeley, or MIT, you have access to opportunity. You have access to networks because of geography or because of your alumni, right? But the top 10% at Ohio State does not have the same access to opportunity, or the top 10% at University of Michigan, right, is thinking about different opportunities because their metropolitan has a completely different class of jobs that are the highest paying jobs. It could be, for the sake of argument, quant or finance or in New York, right? Or it could be manufacturing in Michigan, right? So you're by default, whatever metropolitan you're around, you're going to be thinking about the highest paying jobs in that metropolitan. We're like social animals. We're driven by like where our friends are, where our family is. We're comfortable, right? There's that seeking discomfort is not normal, right?
And how do you do it? Because this is one of the things that you do and you're good at, right? Untraining and training people to be successful, basically.
Right. So
what's the first step? Actually,
I actually think like pre-seed is, we at Draper University operated pre-seed, right? And that how we've structured our model has become pretty good for deal flow, like getting top of funnel sponsored with our business model through corporate partners, government partners, and then making 10 to 15 investments a year. But I'm personally coming to realize that we need to go earlier in the talent pipeline because the talent pipeline itself is broken. Because academia does not clearly solve for it, right? They're not incentivized to. And for companies, training is an afterthought, right? And if you think about it, every single company above 50 employees is run by 10% of A teams, right? They're doing 90% of the work. And it's not just the founders who are building these, or it's not just Elon and Gwen Shotwell who built SpaceX, right? And we give him a lot of credit for like capitalizing that and being the cheerleader, right? But it's also like, the top 10, 20% engineers, right? Who've made it work, and the business teams that have found funding for it or found revenue for it, right? So how do you train more A teams and A players is the fundamental question.
I mean, you touched point on something that I believe right now. Academia is not training entrepreneurs. They can train amazing engineers.
They're not even training people for jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how do we make no?
No.
I mean, let's just make fun of this shit until. I mean, what's the Corvette doing though?
The Corvette.
Yeah,
It has some flags.
it has some flags there.
It's for the Italians here.
I see.
I was about to make a bad joke.